Hi, welcome to at Philly Short Sales. Susanna Kunkel, I'm a short sale expert. If you haven't met me yet, I look forward to speaking with you in person. I'm trying to get to where I can, let me make sure I have the chat available here so you can post any questions. Today, we're going to keep it short, keep it simple, and go over some highlights in the distress market, as I've been hearing some confusion, some questions, some concerns, certainly about foreclosures, what's going on now, what could be coming down the road. And so I want to share some industry insights with you. And so let's get started. First of all, I'm sorry, hold on one second. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to do a foreclosure market update today. Just covering the highlights. Let me see how this can work. If that'll work for you. The highlights of what's going on in Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. Just to introduce myself, I'm a short sale expert. I have been serving the distress market since the mortgage crisis, where I was working in Hawaii, and we got hit fast and hard ahead of time. Nobody knew what was going on. I decided to dive in for various reasons, became an expert in 2008 when some of my contemporaries, people still weren't sure what a short sale was. And I've been committed to helping homeowners avoid foreclosure ever since. Regardless of the condition of the market, there are always people that need help. I'm also a luxury specialist, and that comes to play in that I bring a luxury level of service and marketing to all my clients, regardless if it's a distressed property. And also, I do serve luxury distressed properties and have helped second homeowners as well as people at their primary home who were upside down on the mortgage or for various reasons needed to negotiate with their lender. I continue to invest in my education, certified negotiation expert. With 17 years, I'm still always learning, want to improve what I can do to bring you the best service possible. So today's market versus the mortgage crisis. I have heard a lot of confusion about that, and being very active in today's market and having been entrenched in the mortgage crisis, I'll just offer you my perspective. The biggest quote I've heard from industry leaders is, especially last year in April when we were all scared of what's going to happen, the message in essence was, don't worry, it's not the mortgage crisis. We're not going to have a burst. And even now, this morning, Inman News did an article about whether we're facing a bubble burst or not. And in essence, at this point, a year later, message is changing a little bit to say, yes, there's likely to be a slowdown. There will be some impact from the forbearances and so on. It won't be a burst because the burst was typified by bad mortgages, adjustable rate mortgages, some very creative financing, negative amortization, et cetera. So there came an end date when those balloon payments were due, when the rate adjusted, that created a crisis for the owners, and they found themselves underwater because the escalation of values that was speculative based on easy money crashed. Well, we have an escalation of values today that's going on that's not speculative, but it is based on a spike in values from an external systemic cause, from low inventory, high demand, and some shifts going on in the economic market, as well as, demographic shifts. So those are external factors driving a short-term spike in values. Those values are, Philadelphia market, as Kevin Gillum reported just a couple days ago, I think this year the values were up, they're above 10%. I think it was 12 or 13. And they're predicted to continue to rise, continue to rise through next year. We'll get into more detail about that at another point, because that rapid pace is not sustainable. So we have to be very careful in how we look at the spike in values in terms of how that plays out over time and what we can expect. We're not going to face a bubble burst, but we can expect a slowdown. Think of a bubble leaking air instead of like a balloon leaking air instead of bursting all over the place. Now, something that I haven't heard talked about a lot this past year, but was in discussion among short sale experts and industry insiders prior to COVID, was an expectation of a market shift that had been discussed since our recovery from the mortgage crisis. And part of that expectation of a market shift was due to a large amount of loan modifications done after the mortgage crisis that are basically scheduled to be in default, where they negotiated a loan modification maybe in 2008, 2010, for 5 years, for 10 years. And if those modifications aren't current, if they haven't been able to keep up with those payments, then there's going to be a second and perhaps third wave of loan modifications failing, in essence, where the owners at that point are going to have no other option than to sell if there's enough equity, or to sell with a short sale if not. So that shadow inventory is something that was discussed for 2 to 3 years prior to COVID, and we haven't seen it, so it's a little tough to believe, but trust me, it's there. The third element at play is something that I spoke about on my so-called podcast last year and during COVID shutdown. There has been some distinctive misinformation shared by industry leaders about forbearances. And unfortunately, that misinformation and consequently it trickles forward to consumers through well-intended realtors who got the bad information as well as homeowners not really knowing and getting the right information from their lien holders. A forbearance is different than a deferment, and we will speak about this more, but many of the homeowners, in fact, almost 10% of US homeowners as of today, I think is like high eights at the moment, 8.6, are in a forbearance. The challenge is the forbearance requires a balloon payment at the end to come current on all of the payments that were missed during that forbearance period. It's not debt forgiveness. It doesn't wipe away the obligation to make those payments. What we can hope is that the lien holders will negotiate with homeowners to move the forbearance into a deferment, which the deferment puts the payments on the end of the loan. So instead of a 30-year loan, it might be a 33-year loan, something to that effect. However, this was misquoted a year ago. I know firsthand that homeowners weren't presented the full facts when these things were presented to them a year ago. So we have a huge risk here of, if they're not handled or renegotiated, those forbearances coming due, and homeowners who may not be underwater on value being behind on payments, meaning that they would move immediately into the foreclosure pipeline. So one of the facts that I want to pull up is there's a feeling among homeowners as well as realtors that there are no foreclosures because of the moratorium on auctions. So the auctions are on hold. That does not mean that properties are not in the foreclosure pipeline. In fact, here I'll switch over to show you where these numbers come from. I subscribe to Realty Track, where you can pull up by county the properties that are in schedule for auction, pre-foreclosure, and trustee auction. You can see. So this is exactly, I'm showing you source. I source everything that I speak about. So let's go over this. In Philadelphia, and this is prior to COVID shutdown, there are 3,100 properties in default who have received a lis pendens notice of foreclosure and or been scheduled previously for auction. So those properties, the banks are not being passive during the shutdown. They have the foreclosure pipeline is alive and well. All they're waiting for is the green light. Once the COVID restrictions are lifted, you can count on those 3,100 properties starting to move rapidly into auction. In Montgomery County, we are at 1,600 Delaware, almost 1,300, and almost 1,000 for Bucks County. So that doesn't include people that might be in forbearance now, who might be at risk. This has to do with pre-COVID defaults that had already been filed. So those are in the pipeline to go to auction. And then we also face potential risk of forbearances that could be coming and being added to the pipeline. Where do we face the greatest risks of downturn in the market from foreclosed properties? And I'll say this is from my experience of going through the mortgage crisis in a resort location. When you have an environment where prices are driven up by this external stimuli, and it doesn't match with the economy, which is something that Professor Gilliam spoke about on Thursday, specifically in Philadelphia, on the lower priced properties. His concern as an economist was that when the values go higher, that seems like a good thing. However, if it's not in alignment with the economy, then we have a problem. Now, the luxury market in Philadelphia has been robust, and it could very well unfold to where the luxury properties see some protection from the potential downturn in values because they're based on an economic base that can afford luxury. We have a service segment, we have people moving from New York, people working from home. So there is an element in Philadelphia, an income bracket that can afford the $1 million+, $2 million+ home, who those properties are more likely to retain their value, even if there's some dip in terms of appraised value. The lower priced properties, the modestly priced properties that are being driven up right now because of low inventory, is where we face the greatest risk. And just to give you a story, on Kauai, when we were in the mortgage crisis in 2004, 2005, and all the prices were escalating so rapidly, I heard a realtor literally say, you can't go wrong by anything on Kauai. Well, that wasn't really true. We didn't understand what was going on, but at the same time, little plantation homes in the middle of nowhere with no ocean view, just a small yard, single wall construction, where the prices were driven up by the frenzy to 500,000. Not only did they fall, but they've stayed down. Whereas the oceanfront properties, the resort properties got hit by the mortgage crisis, those values dropped, and those owners that were over leveraged did need to resolve them with a short sale or to sell the property. However, they have rebounded. And those quality properties that have beautiful locations, today, those people that were able to hold on, they survived the ups and downs of the mortgage crisis, and the properties have tremendous value. Now, Kauai is unique. It's a different market. It's a resort market. But the parallel is, the single family home in one of the areas of Philadelphia that is not luxury, that is not driven by, those amenities and lifestyle that feed that type of value, but it's just a modest home area. Those would be a bigger risk for a downturn in values after when this eases, the inventory balance eases a little bit. What that will be exactly, we don't know. But if I had to call an area at greatest risk, it would be the lower priced properties. And Kevin did mention, that's where the foreclosure crisis hit hardest in Philadelphia during the mortgage crisis as well. So what about that misinformation? I have to tell you, I did a video a year ago. I originally had this as the cover, but I didn't want to get sued by Lauryn Hill, calling it the miseducation of realtors. So just in case you don't believe me, I have the quotes right here, the information coming from Dr. Lawrence Yoon. Here, I hope the sound is coming through. I guess seems like it may not be. But this was the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway hosting a YouTube, a Zoom meeting with Lawrence Yoon. And he was saying was saying that forbearances will be put on the end of the loan, which is not true. I apologize if this isn't coming through. Let me know. I'll send you a link. Okay, well, I didn't mean to offend anyone. I'm a reporter. It is what it is. Those were direct quotes. I hope you could hear them. If not, let me know and I'll send you the video. So that misinformation campaign was real. And I have my own theories about why would people, tell some people something that, us professionals, something that isn't true or isn't accurate, except for the fact that, a lot of realtors were scared and maybe we were just being told what we want to hear. When it comes to talking about foreclosures, it takes a little courage as a professional or as a homeowner to face the facts and look at some of these things. It's almost like I used to squint, I was like, I don't want to look like a scary movie. I don't want to look at foreclosures. I don't want to talk about them. And I certainly understand what that's like for a homeowner. But, for us realtors, we have to be brave enough to look at the facts, to consider what's going on, and to advise our clients about the pros and cons and potential risks. So I just wanted to share some highlights with you about what's going on in our local areas. Feel free to please subscribe wherever you see the button and private message me. We'll have a one-on-one chat to go into more depth about your concerns about the market and how these potential changes might impact you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be having more of these events. Look forward to your feedback, your questions, and let's stay safe and take care of each other. Take care.